I'm trying to start a social business in Africa. And whenever I tell this, everybody starts to ask what my background is and why I chose this path. I was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan. I have 2 brothers, mom and dad, and nothing special until one day I encountered the reason why I'm doing what I do now. It was the picture in my high school textbook. There were 2 African women washing their clothes in the river. But the focus was not on them, but on the dead soldier's body floating in the same river. And it struck me, although it was a combination of normal and abnormal things for me, it was both normal, an everyday scene for these 2 women. And I didn't know what I can do, but the gravity, the impact of the picture was so much that it changed almost everything of my life at then. And I said I didn't know what I can do, but I thought at least I have to speak English. And I also wanted to experience what developing countries are like. So I chose to study abroad in an English-speaking developing country, which is known as Los Angeles. And I know everybody will imagine this as LA, but the LA I experienced every day was like this. And if there's anybody who wants to safely experience developing countries, I would highly recommend to go to LA. Because the urban issues in LA and the developing countries overlap. The immigrants in LA and the low-income residents in developing countries act similarly. Both of them surge into the cities for a search for a job. Naturally, low-income housing lacks, and they create a slum-like community. The public transit is not enough as well to accommodate them. And also, the employment is not enough to hire every one of them. And uncertainties sometimes lead people to cause crimes as well, and so on. So the public sector in LA and also the public aid agencies in developing countries were both saying, we cannot solve all of these by our own. We need the help from the private sector. We need their efficiency and innovation. And when I landed my first job, it was a time that society was asking for higher involvement of the public-private sector in helping the developing countries to grow. The first company I joined worked in between the public sector and the private sector to create new jobs and boost the income of the local people in developing countries. The idea was that the public sector creates the infrastructure, and then the private sector brings in their factories and create new jobs. And the method is called Public-Private Partnership. During the 3 years, I've been to Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, India, and Tanzania. But none of the projects materialized. Far from it, none of the projects actually studied carefully what the ordinary people's needs are. Instead, I just talked to the government of whichever country I was working at. And I thought this top-down method will not take to the place I was vaguely imagining when I first saw the picture. I wanted to work closer with the people who's in struggle. So I started to look for a new job, mostly in the nonprofit sector, because I knew that they work closely on the grounds with the local people. But I wasn't giving up about the effectiveness of the private sector as well. And that was the time I encountered to the alternate method called BoP Business in the current organization that I'm working for. BoP stands for the base of the pyramid, which basically means the low-income people who consist about 70% of the global population. BoP Businesses is a business especially catering to such population. It first started as providing goods and services that is affordable to BoPs. For example, a lot of the BoPs are engaging in day labor. They only have small changes to spend every day. So rather than providing detergents, milk, or spices in a big bottle, they try to provide in a smaller sachet, just enough for daily use. Now, the BoP business has evolved to providing goods and services that empowers the BoPs. For example, a lot of the BoPs do not have access to electricity. When it gets dark, they have to stop working or studying. And shorter working hours means lower income. Shorter studying hours means it may lead the children to drop out from schools earlier, which makes them underprivileged in the future. So a company provided a low-tech solar light to them. And like this, the BoP business have asked a higher involvement and initiative of the private sector to understand the needs and situations of the BoPs and contribute them to access to higher upward growth. In the past few years, I worked mostly together with the Japanese companies, and all the projects that I joined were dedicated to these people and really studying carefully about the needs and favors of the BoPs. But still, it was hard to materialize into a business. And the reason is complicated, and I cannot summarize into one, but partially because being social requires commitment. Commitment to the time, investment, people, and most importantly, to change the mindset of the company itself. Projections to make profit may be twice longer than the usual businesses. Sometimes we have to ask to downgrade the technology that the engineers have put so much time and energy to make it to one of the best. And you know how hard that is for us Japanese, who are known for high technology. So I thought, why don't us, the social sector, acquire a business mind and start a BoP business by our own? And I'm still not giving up. I still think that the private sectors will play an important role for the developing countries' sustainable and upward growth. But asking them to jump towards the social sector may be hard. We need to create a stepping stone for them. And I think us acquiring a business mind, changing our mindset, will help to create that stepping stone. And before I go into the details about my business, I would like to point out the common mistake that people always make. Nonprofit organization does not mean we cannot make money. We can actually make profit, but it won't be divided among the stakeholders like the private companies do to their shareholders. Instead, the profit will be reinvested to the projects that we do for the society's betterment. And this shift, us acquiring a business mind, is also important for us nonprofit to go out, to move out from the trap that we always suffer. When we say we work for nonprofit, we sometimes regard it as a volunteering sector. To do, it's a job to do aside from a main job, when actually all of us are putting all of our life into this job. And part of the reason is because we are regarded as a sector that cannot sustain ourselves independently. We have to sometimes ask for funding. So I'd like to change this. The current project I'm trying to do is aiming to reduce the malnutrition rate in Zambia and Africa. For this project, we're trying to be self-sustainable by forming a technical partnership with a private company. We are trying to grow a nutritious agriculture product native to the African continent in a business scale and provide them an affordable price. The technology is provided by a Japanese company. but it has been downgraded to fit to the reality of Africa. But we realize that as long as we are the ones downgrading the technology, it won't cause a lot of controversy. The profit we're asking for is also smaller, just enough to make us independently work. And I think this step is an important challenge for both nonprofit and private sectors. For us nonprofit to become sustainable and to become mainstream, and for the private sectors to gradually move towards social. Since 3/11, we've been witnessing an increasing number of nonprofit organizations in Japan. We've been also impressed at how much private companies' creativity can empower us. And I would like to see more collaboration between these two sectors to change the society, to bring innovations to Africa, and to reduce the sadness in this world. ありがとうございました。